Hi, my name is Alice with ATech Tech Tutorials, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to solve a problem that many of you have probably faced. And that is when you try to make a field required. And I specifically mean when you try to make the little red asterisk show up next to the field in Jira, you inadvertently break it for somebody else in your company. So if you've ever tried to make a field required, but you've gotten a lot of complaints because you made it required for one team, but all of a sudden some other team got impacted and they didn't want that field required, I'm going to show you how to navigate and how to basically set up your field configuration so that you can make fields required for one team, but not the other. If you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed. Drop a like if you get value out of this video. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section below. Let's jump into Jira. Okay, so here I am in Jira, and just to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about very quickly is when I go to hit the create button, you see these little red asterisks. This means that these fields are required. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this component field a required field for this project, okay? And this project is, based on what I was just showing you, right, is going to be this Jira Scrum demonstration. And so if I do my job correctly, I'm going to make component a required field in just the Jira Scrum demonstration project, but not in any of the other ones. And I'm going to prove to you and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the easiest way to do this, and the way most people go about doing it, is they go to the issue settings here, go to issues, you come down to field configurations, and then once you're here, you'll notice that you really only have one field configuration. This out of the box is how it comes, right? So you have one, and so you're going to click on configure for that one, and you're going to find your component field, and once you find this component field, you hit required. And this is great. This is what we want, right? Somebody wanted the field required, and what this does now is when I go to hit the create button, you'll notice that my components is now required because it has an asterisk, right? And this is what we wanted. The problem is when we switch to another project, like the Thursday one, components is also required, right? And so some teams might not be using components, and you can swap out components for pretty much any field, right? So I'm just using components as an example here. So what I'm going to teach you is essentially how do we make components required. I'm going to switch it back to optional. How do we make it required without making it required for everybody across the company, okay? And so if you haven't guessed it by now, you're going to want to click on the little gear. You're going to want to click on issues, and then we're going to come down to these field configurations. So fundamentally at the base level, we're going to basically make a copy of this field configuration. And what I recommend you do, because field configurations can be applied at the issue level, just for scalability, just so that you can kind of think long-term, right? Because what you'll probably find is a scenario where acceptance criteria, let's take acceptance criteria as an example. You want to make acceptance criteria a required field. This is great, but acceptance criteria are usually like at the story level, and maybe they're not at the epic level, maybe they're not at the bug level, and maybe you have a spike and they're not required at the spike level either, right? So when you just create one new field configuration for a whole new project, that project is now broken off from the rest of Jira, and you'll achieve like some separation. But the problem is going to be now within your issues types within that Jira project, you're going to be stuck having all those same required fields. And to add insult to injury, if you have, like within your issue types, if you have different screens, right? So if you were to come over to your screens, and let's just say you had a screen scheme or just a screen for your spikes, you had a screen for your stories, you had a screen for your bugs, you had a screen for your tasks, and they're all different, right? They all have different fields in them, and you just made a field required, it's not in that screen, then guess what? You're going to have another big problem, right? Because now you just made a field required that doesn't even show up when you're trying to create the ticket. So now you've created the worst possible scenario, which is I can't even create an issue because the field that is required doesn't even show up for me to fill it out. So this is the worst case. So in order to mitigate that, in order to kind of solve for that problem, my recommendation and my best practice is when you do go make your copy, you don't call it like the team A's default field configuration, right? I would actually do like team A story default field configuration. That way I have one for the story. Now this will add a whole bunch of more field configurations, but I think it's worth it. I think the trade-off is worth it because in the future, should your team want to be pretty picky, they have now the granularity and the modularity to kind of change the right one and only the one they want to change. So if they want to make the component and the acceptance criteria required in just their stories for just this particular project, you can do that. Later, if another team wanted to adopt the same scheme, we can do that as well now because we can actually just like cherry pick it into our field scheme, which is what we're going to do next. So once we have a default here, we're going to go to the story and I'm going to go look up component, and I still can't spell component and I'm still clicking the wrong buttons. So I'm going to find component, hit search, and I'm going to hit required. And so now my component is going to be required. But you'll notice if I go back to create that my component is still not required, which is really, really good, right? Because at this point, all we've done is created a copy and made the change. And this proves that this is going to work because until this default field configuration is applied to the project, it's not going to get done. So how do we apply it to the project? So we can't actually apply the field configuration directly to the project. We're gonna come to the field configuration scheme, right? And so we want to add a field configuration scheme, and this is where you would want to do it project specific, right? So JSD, I would put field configuration scheme, and I'm gonna go ahead and click add. Okay, from here now I'm gonna edit it, and I'm going to basically tell it, we'll go grab my team A1, and this is where you can start building out. So if you had team A stories, team A bugs, team A spikes, team A tasks, team A epics, this is where you can start kind of grouping them all together and having them be connected together with the scheme. And once you have the scheme set up, right, then you can associate an issue type with the field configuration. And so by default, this is going to do it for all of them. And so what you can do if you wanted to, this is a little bit more advanced, I'm just going to call out the stories, right? So I'm just going to find my story, and I'm going to say that this story is going to use the story one. But guess what? I'm actually going to reverse what I just did, because now if I didn't want to, right, if I just wanted, I knew I just wanted my stories to follow a special one, all the other issue types in my project will follow the one where the component is not required, and only my stories are going to have the component required, right? And so now that I have all of this here, now I can go back to my project, to the one I actually want to make this effect in, go to the project settings, and then I'm going to come down to fields. Once I'm here, you're going to notice that I'm using the default field configuration that's shared by 8 projects, but not anymore, because we're going to come to the actions and we're going to use a different scheme. And when we switch to the schemes, I'm switching to that new field configuration scheme that I made. I'm going to associate it. And now you see that my story is broken out, it's in its own, and all the other issue types are still shared. So they're still going to be part of everybody else, but only my story got broken out. And so now let me show you what this looks like. So when I go to hit the create button, I'm in a story, my component is filled out. If I change, with still staying within the same project, if I change the type, I'm going to go to a task, my component is not required, okay? If I change back to a story, you'll see that it is indeed required. Components is required. Now, really the tricky part, right? The part where did we do this successfully, right? So that we don't break everything for everybody else. If I change projects, so let me just go to my Friday Jira class, my components, even though I'm still in a story, isn't required. So this right here is the best way for you to make the field required. And you want to do it this way. There's another way. I have a video in a couple of weeks that I have scheduled. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you drop a like for this. But there is a different way to make your fields required without having to do all this hoop jumping that I just did. Now, the reason we wanted to do it this way, the reason we want to use this particular strategy where we do modify the field configuration, is because now when I come into my backlog and I do an inline creation, which means I'm not clicking the create button. Because remember, when you hit the create button, you're going to see all the fields. But when you're in line here, when you're in the backlog, and I'm just creating an issue, this is some story, and I click enter, normally the behavior is that the story gets created instantaneously. But because we now have a required field that isn't the summary, Jira is going to pop up this modal for us, and we're now going to have the opportunity to fill it out, create that required field, and then hit create, and then go on with the rest of our day. So that's pretty much it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you got any value out of it, make sure you drop a like, share it with your coworkers, share it with your Jira admin, share it with everybody. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps tremendously. And if you have any questions or comments, or if you have a different way of doing it, let me know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.